we've arrived here at the end, almost, of Project Voice Worldwide. We're very honored to have a special guest with us to close us out. And let me go to you, Mark, and promote you to panelist. And we'll kick this thing off. Mark, you are here if you can hear me. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Long time no see.
I know, it's been a while, Brad.
Thank you for being here, Mark. Thank you for giving us some of your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It's very much appreciated. And I guess we'll kick this off with so actually a point of order before we go. If you have a question for Mark Cuban, please put it in the Q&A box in Zoom. If you put it in the chat, it may be seen, it may not be seen. If you put it in the Q&A box, it will be seen. And if it's something that, you know, other than anything other than violently self-promotional, we'll ask that. So Mark, it's a pleasure to have you here. So when you and I last spoke, it was a couple of years ago and about 50 years ago in COVID years.
Yeah, no kidding.
Big tech was front and center with voice and AI. It was Alexa this, Google that, and maybe talk about Siri over here. That's changed. And the question is how much it's changed. Just to kick us off, what is your perception of the attitude toward big tech and how it affects what we can expect to see with voice and AI moving forward?
You know, that's an interesting question. You know, when you talk about big tech, when you talk about anything anymore, you got to kind of stratify it. There's what happens on social media, there's what happens on traditional linear media and websites, and then there's what happens in the real world. You know, because there's so much perception related to all this that doesn't necessarily match up to all the reality. The reality is that big tech is under fire from government and on social media and media sources, but they're, with maybe just a few exceptions, they're not really changing their actions at all. And look, we can argue whether that's good or bad, but we're still, because we're still in such a formative stage in a lot of things we're talking about, whether it's AI, whether it's ambient voice, whether it's blockchain and smart contracts, they're all, you know, precision medicine, whatever it may be, you know, there's not a lot of understanding outside the tech industry. And because of that, there's a lot of confusion. And because of that, you know, there's a lot of people shuffling papers, but it hasn't led to a lot of impact yet.
Yeah, well, and you know, part of this conversation as well in this evolution of how to view big tech is what we saw earlier this week with Microsoft buying Nuance for a lot of money. Maybe not a lot of money for you.
It's a lot of money.
You know, what was your reaction? We were in Chattanooga, bringing, you know, an in-person conference back, you know, an executive level gathering of folks in this space, and it cast a shadow. And I want to get your thoughts on what was your reaction when you saw the news Microsoft buying Nuance for 16 billion, or after the debt 19.7.
You know, it was interesting because they got rid of their Siri equivalent, and what was the name of the
Cortana,
right? And so I saw the Cortana news first, and I was like, that's interesting because you know, it's not like Microsoft just to bail, you know, in something that's going to be so impactful, because they you know, they were early with Cortana and you just could never get any real traction. And then boom, the Nuance deal hits, and then it was like, okay, it makes sense. You know, it wasn't so much that Microsoft had given up on voice, it was that they realized that they were a distant competitor to Amazon and Google and Apple. And so they had to make this move. So if you truly believe in voice and voice activation and ambient voice and corporate applications and consumer applications, you know, if you truly believe that that's going to be integral to how we do things going forward, it was a necessary move for Microsoft. They really didn't have a choice.
A lot of that move centered around healthcare, because that's one of Nuance's core capabilities. And it raises the question of what exactly we're going to see out of digital healthcare and how voice can play a role in that, and conversational AI can play a role in that. Already prior to the pandemic, we had seen that evolution underway. And like so many other things, it's accelerated. Your thoughts about the role that voice and conversational AI can play in healthcare, just with what you've seen out of this pandemic?
Well, let me take a step aside there for a second. While the discussion has been about what Nuance does in healthcare, I don't think that's necessarily the specific reason why Microsoft bought it. I think healthcare is a great proof of concept for everything else that voice can do. That it really is a stressing of voice and ambient voice. And if it works for healthcare, Microsoft is going to be able to apply it to a lot of commercial applications and industries in addition to consumer. Because I just don't see this as, okay, this is just one vertical industry that we need to be into, so let's buy Nuance. I don't see it that way at all. But to answer your question, obviously, the better the relationship and the more time that a doctor or a healthcare provider can spend with a patient, or not even a patient, just any of us who are looking for proactive care and support, is a good thing. And obviously, when any of us have gone to the doctor, often there's a note taker there, there's somebody with a laptop taking notes, or the doctor trying to make notations, because a big part of providing care these days is dealing with the administrivia. And if you can reduce or eliminate the administrivia and automate that, that's one first step. And then at the same time, if you're doing transcription, that's a data source for a lot of other things as well. And so I'm sure this is a multi-pronged approach for Microsoft. But I think introducing voice and AI, or extending voice and AI in healthcare, is significant, it's important, and it's going to have to happen. And I think it's not only in terms of the way we've seen it or experienced it now, but as you get into virtual doctors, right? I'm talking to organizations now that, not necessarily for healthcare, but there are chatbot companions that are coming out now, and they're only going to get smarter and more utilized as people realize it's hard to get a person, and particularly younger generations or excluded groups realize it's better to talk to a chatbot that's been trained significantly than not to talk to anybody. And Alexa is training us to a certain extent, Siri is training us to a certain extent, but as our trust increases, then I think the impact is going to be exponential. And just on the matter of trust, realize there was a time 20 years ago when we were all told we should be afraid of putting our credit card information onto any website, that it was an immediate opportunity for hackers. And it's not that it hasn't happened, but and we're being told now to be concerned about our private data being distributed. And so I think we'll continue to trust ambient voice and interactive chatbots and the AI behind it more and more and more, and we'll have more and more control of that, which will increase our trust even more.
Yeah, speaking of trust, my grandmother was told her whole life that smoking cigarettes is perfectly fine, and she ended up with a heart attack at age 40 and quit that very day. And so, yeah, the point of trust is well taken. We'll come back to that in just a second. I have to ask you this. So when you and I spoke previously, we had a nice laugh at the expense of the Facebook portal, which at that time was some real garbage. Well, sadly and unbelievably, Facebook has had the last laugh on that, because with the pandemic, I think the Facebook portal will possibly go down alongside maybe the Echo Show too, as a pandemic defining device. It went almost overnight to, you just put those things in the clearance bin, please, mark them down to 3 cents, to you couldn't find them in stores. You had people camping out in odd hours at night trying to get them. Your thoughts on on that and Facebook's position in all this?
You know what? Historically, I've always been laissez-faire when it came to tech, but over the last few years, my attitude has gone 180 degrees, particularly when it comes to Facebook. And it goes back to trust. I don't trust them at all. And it's unfortunate because it makes me feel bad, you know, that we have a player that I think puts economics over consumer and stakeholder interest, you know, and well-being. And I think we saw that with the elections. I think we've seen it with, you know, vaccine misinformation. You know, we can purge porn and nipples, but we can't seem to find a way to deal with misinformation or care. And I'm a big believer that anything that is algorithmically amplified online, whether it's, you know, streams or text or news or voice, whatever it may be, should not get 230 protections, because, you know, AI-driven algorithmic amplifications of information is a business choice that Facebook and others make, not just Facebook, that should not be protected from lawsuits, etc. And so, you know, it's unfortunate. It really, really is. But every time you lift up the covers on something Facebook has done, you see that they put revenue first or they put profits first. And then they're really, really good at creating a smokescreen by saying, we just hired, you know, 20,000 people to be auditors and evaluators of this information, knowing that, you know, they find the trigger words, jobs, hiring, as a way to create a smokescreen over, we've been ignoring and putting, you know, revenue and economics first. And that's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think Facebook, when the book is finally written on Facebook someday, and they become a MySpace rather than Facebook, I think we will look back, at least I personally will look back at the story that is somewhat recent where, you know, they've hired all these people to, as you said, auditors. These are the people who have to, as their job, look at violent content.
All day, every day.
Yeah, all day, every day, incredibly crazy sexual content. And somebody, you know, first of all, you never would have known if it wasn't for some pretty courageous reporting. But then when it comes out, Facebook's like, well, yeah, we do kind of do that. Sorry.
All the time. Not like once, twice, every single time. Yeah. You know, there's a whistleblower from inside saying, no, this is what's really happening. And that's really unfortunate. And, you know, there's an old country saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. You know, when you get too greedy, you know, it tends to come back and bite you. And, you know, when you look at Facebook's numbers domestically here in the United States, particularly among the younger generations, they're declining, they're not growing. You know, my kids are 11, 14, and 17, and none of them have a Facebook account, nor do they have an interest in having a Facebook account. And, you know, that, you know, younger millennials, Gen Z, they're much more socially conscious than older generations. And, you know, and when you look at the data that I've seen anyways, in terms of those accepting misinformation and amplifying misinformation, and really supporting the algorithm, giving the algorithms a reason to do what they do, they're boomers. You know, they're people, you know, that are 60s and older, and now that's even trending younger into 40s and 50s. And so, you know, hopefully, you know, my kids, our kids, you know, Gen Z, younger millennials will step up and say, you know what, this is not acceptable. We won't do business with it.
So I'm going to ask you about Apple next. So, and by the way, for folks in the Zoom, you have a question for Mark, put it in the Q&A. We will get to those. I'll pull that up in roughly 10 to 15 minutes from now, and we'll start to go through those. Apple. So we talked about that in the previous discussion as well. I think Apple's always a Rorschach test for people. You know, they kind of see what they want to see. But there have been some changes, and I'm just curious, with your very unique line of sight on the world and on tech, your thoughts on Apple and their role to play in voice and AI.
You know, the underpinning that I see from Apple that's impacting, or at least supposedly impacting everything they do, is privacy. And I think that's good. Particularly as it applies to voice, because there is a fear factor. Is Alexa listening to us? Is Siri listening to us? How can that information be used? What is it being used to train in AI? What's happening with all that information? And, Apple seems to be, placing that priority on privacy. We haven't really heard anything from them in terms of AI and bias and impact there, and what they're doing to try to prevent that, because literally, what Siri or Alexa tells us in response to ever expanding depth of questions, bias matters, and so I think Apple as a whole continues to excel as a hardware company. We trust what they do, and the products are good. Particularly, my iWatch and my iPhone, and we like their products, but they're becoming more of a service company, obviously, and that's driving a lot more of their revenues. And at some point, and they've already said to a certain extent that they're disappointed in what Siri has become in terms of utilization, because here I have Siri on my watch, Siri on the phone, and I have an Alexa right here, and I'm going to use my Alexa to ask it questions. I'm not going to use.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I'm not either that, Alexa, but at the same time, that's an issue for them. And so how they deal with that is really important. And I think the underpinning for that is that the world, in terms of corporate, global corporations, we're evolving into companies that are AI haves and AI have nots, because AI is hard. And, voice and AI go hand in glove. They're dependent on each other to a great extent. And obviously voice is 100% dependent on AI for everything that it does, other than basic stuff. And so, Apple is a company that's one of the AI haves, and they'll figure out ways to utilize AI more and more, because that black box, there's not just a black box of neural networks and all the different research creating different types of neural networks that create new opportunities. There's also the efficiency of, from that research that makes AI, be able to use less data and come up with better responses. But there's also the corporate knowledge that's the most important, because knowing what applications to use AI for, knowing how to do a project that you're going to be able to take to completion, knowing when to trust the results of your AI projects and not, because a lot of neural networks are so black box that people tend to trust because they don't know how they got from point A to point B. And in voice, with medicine as an example, right? If you say something to a system and you get an answer back and it's based off of some AI that we're not quite sure how it was put together, that's scary in some respects, but we're still going to trust it, until somebody tells us otherwise. And so going back to Apple, I think Apple's got the trust factor. You hear me talking about trust over and over and over again, because it's the complexity of the systems that we're using and the life or death aspect of the systems of where we're implementing them. Trust is critical, but Apple's got trust. They're good at AI. They'll get better. They've got the availability of hardware and resources to be able to scale their AI projects to be truly impactful. And a lot of companies don't, because it's very expensive. They're able to hire because they're Apple, and they're able to pay because they're Apple. And so you add all these things together and Apple becomes a very significant company. And you can say a lot of the same things about Google and others in comparable circumstances, but it's, they're going to have a strategic advantage because of their ability to use voice and AI.
So, no, that's great. So I want to ask you about two things, and then we'll take some audience Q&A. And the first one is social audio. So social audio is a pandemic-born creature.
Yeah. Did you say pandemic born or pandemic porn?
A little bit of both. For all if you read my Twitter feed, it's the hype is ferocious. and Clubhouse has risen it all the way to wherever it is they've gone, and everybody else is copying them. And people are trying to grab a hold of Clubhouse and throw them on the guillotine and do that to them. The way I see it is that social audio and voice and AI have an inevitable train wreck, they are going to come together some which way. And I'm interested in that. I want to hear your thoughts on the rise of social audio and how you see this social audio movement reconciling with this larger and already existing voice and AI landscape.
So first, let me say I'm involved with the company Fireside Chat, which we call podcasting 2.0 as opposed to social audio. And I'll talk about some of the differences. The challenge for Clubhouse is that it's just a social network, right? That happens to use audio versus text or video. And that makes perfect sense because audio, once it's compressed, can still have good audio quality, and it's easy to scale and it's easy to add features to. But there's a level of anonymity, even though you have to sign up and be given an invitation, that has the same impact on social networks that we see with every other social network, whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it is, which is at the beginning, it's always great because there's some, even if it's tangential, connection between all the participants. It's truly a social graph that's limited to people that you value, at least to some extent. But as the business takes over and you try to grow, then it becomes significantly more difficult to keep the quality at the levels you originally experienced. And that's the challenge that social audio and Clubhouse in particular is going through. There's just no way to maintain any levels of quality when you have 10 million users. I don't care how many rooms you have, and I don't care who the moderators are. You're going to get imposters. You're going to get hustle porn. You're going to get other kinds of porn. You're going to get charlatans. You're going to get people selling everything and anything because it's a platform. And now that people are literate in social media and have experience on what's worked and what hasn't worked in other social media and where the economics lag, Clubhouse is not immune to any of that. And as AI comes in, obviously, it goes back to what we said with Facebook, trying to be able to process the audio to be able to, put a 7-second delay like they do in TV, if you will, where, you're able to pick out things that you don't want in there or to exclude people that you don't want in there using AI. And that's going to be a lot easier said than done. Just like, a lot of us thought, well, with Facebook, they'll just use AI, find the porn, find the bad actors and all that, and everything will be good. And, as we talked about before, you don't have to hire 12,000 auditors or verifiers if all your AI works. And Clubhouse is going to have the same problem. And like a Fireside Chat that I'm involved with, we don't just let anybody in or just let anybody send an invite to anybody. We're not trying to get that complete network effect. We're trying to have, if you go back to the early days of Facebook, when it was only EDU, it was a completely different beast because everybody had that connection. They were all in college or affiliated with a college, and that limited, the long tail, if you will, and in a lot of different respects. And so social audio faces that exact same thing, and AI is not going to solve it.
You're right about early Facebook. Everyone did have a connection. It was all the women that Mark Zuckerberg wanted to be with.
If you go across all the early apps and applications, that's a common theme, from Snapchat to Facebook, you name it.
I can't get back on that. That's we'll leave that in the toxic. Last question for you, from me. NFTs. So interesting group of companies in the voice and AI realm that are embracing NFTs, embracing blockchain. I am kind of curmudgeonly and contrarian. Make me care about NFTs. Tell me why I should care and somebody should care.
So first, an NFT, the way we're seeing it right now for art, is basically just a collectible. And a digital collectible is just more efficient to buy, sell, and trade. Period, end of story. So if you forget all the technology behind it, it's no different than buying and selling a baseball card. Most people who collect baseball cards, basketball cards, even any number of different things. They stick them in a safe. So it's not necessarily physical or having access. And there's no different in how we value things that are digital now. You know, if you go to one of my kids or even me, you know, many of us have been in that position where you use up all the storage on your phone, and the hardest thing to do is to decide what to delete. You know, that's how we value things that are digital. And so if you think of it more as just a digital collectible, that's fine. Now, if you think about how we got there, that's what's interesting to me. And the NFTs that we're seeing now as collectibles are just proof of concept. Because what's really driving this is you can create an NFT and able to, you know, add royalties to it, buy it and sell it in any marketplace. And there's a bunch of standards because of something called smart contracts that are primarily on Ethereum. The smart contracts have no human intervention. They just say, you know, it's just a programming language called Solidity that's very similar to JavaScript that has a bunch of triggers in it. If this is sold, then these things happen. If then that happens, then these things happen. It's just if this, then that type program. Well, if you start applying it to a lot of different applications and combine that with the blockchain, which is one, public, which is two, decentralized, meaning it's trustless, there's nobody else in charge, then you can start thinking about unlimited number of applications. So with the Mavericks, we're looking at NFTs as tickets. So that we, rather than print a ticket, we'll send you an NFT to your phone that has a QR code on it, and it'll have all kinds of cool stuff and features associated with it as part of a smart contract. You walk into the arena, you show it, we know your seat, we take you to your seat. The minute the game starts, the features, because of the smart contract, the features of that NFT change. Now you can get special discounts, you can get special videos for great plays, and after the game is over, that quote unquote NFT ticket becomes a collectible. I was at the game when this happened, right? When this no hitter was thrown, when, you know, they won the championship, when, you know, Dirk had his 30,000th point, and you can buy or sell that on any marketplace because they're all compatible with each other on any given blockchain. And so there's unique features associated. And then you add to that the trustless part. You know, we talked about healthcare. Right now, you've got businesses that fall into the category of we have to trust them because we have no choice. You know, insurance companies, whether it's health insurance or car insurance or house insurance, we gave them our premiums, and now, you know, when something goes wrong, you know, something breaks, the pipes leak because the temperature dropped, we have to fight to get our money back. That's a trusted environment where the trust is centralized. Using blockchain, that becomes decentralized, and adding AI to that. If I have a smart contract that I'll give you a simple example. There's insurance now that you can get that's blockchain / smart contract based on Ethereum that has what they call an oracle, meaning it takes feeds from a central data source. And so you can get insurance that says if the temperature in the city of Dallas proper falls below a certain degree level, and or depending on the insurance I buy, the precipitation is above a certain level, here's my premium and here's what I get paid. And I can sign up for it. So if, you know, in Dallas, if the temperature is going to 0 and there's more than 4 inches of snow, we ain't playing the game and it's shut off. So I can buy insurance. The interesting part is prior to smart contracts and blockchain, buying that insurance, I could, but I have to go to my insurance company and beg them and prove to them that where the arena is, you know, these things happen. With smart contracts and data sources like this, it automatically pays me. So I pay them in Ethereum for my premiums. Let's just say I pay 100 and I get back 1,000. If that temperature, you know, on the days that I'm covered falls below that amount, that threshold, and goes above the precipitation threshold based off the data coming from the National Weather Service, I don't have to call anybody. I look at my Ethereum wallet and it's just there. So when you look at NFTs, don't think of it only as the collector's market. Think of them also as smart contracts that can use independent data sources to be able to trigger events, you know, whether it's tickets, whether it's insurance, you know. I mean, think of if, oh my God, Cliff Notes. Think of Cliff Notes were put on an NFT. You buy one for $10 on an open used marketplace. When you're done with it, you took your test, you can sell it again. And because of the royalty features of the smart contracts, Cliff Notes keeps on getting paid as the originator of that content And that's a feature of an NFT smart contract. These are all features that have true business applications that can be combined, will be combined with AI, will be combined with voice. So it's easy, you're going to see certain circumstances where it'll be, okay, I need voice authentication for this ticket. So Mark says something, and based off of what's in the NFT and in the features of the NFT, it'll authenticate me or not.
You're making me a believer. You're making me a believer. So, how much money would someone need to pay me to take the NFTs for the Mavs beating LeBron, getting that championship?
You need that thing behind me, or I'm going the wrong way here, wrong shoulder.
Yeah.
Behind me, right?
Yes. Thank you for that.
Now we need more. That was too long ago. Now we need more of them. But yeah, watching Luka play, just those become collectibles. And I grew up trading, buying and selling stamps and baseball cards. And any of us who did those things as kids can tell stories about how our siblings or little brothers or sisters ate them, threw them away, our parents threw them away. You don't have any of those worries with digital collectibles. So there's a lot of benefits to them as well.
That's interesting stuff. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to get into some audience Q&A here. If you have a question for Mark, put it into the Q&A box in Zoom. If it's in the chat, it will probably not be seen. I'm going to go through these and just select some out and try to do it in a way where people can have one question for Mark apiece. So Mark, and I'm just going to read it verbatim, just answer it in rapid fire fashion, whatever you think. Sure. From Jay Ruperl, in the current context, if a voice tech entrepreneur were to make a pitch to you, what specific attributes of the business or entrepreneur would pique your interest?
Having traction right now. Because right now the challenge for voice isn't whether it makes sense, it's making it a consumable daily habit for people. Right now, we've trained people that have Alexas and other, Google Home and other devices to ask what the weather is, their schedule is, and done some basic things, but we're not to spreadsheet macros yet, where people are doing their own things and customizing for their own homes. And that's an opportunity. I say it all the time that if I were 16 years old and needed a job, I'd be going door to door asking my neighbors who has an Alexa and programming it for them, or going to the local car dealership and offering my services to program any cars that have Alexa as a feature or Google Home as a feature. And so I think what I look for really is somebody who has some traction and customers who are saying, wow, this is really cool and it's life-changing, or really improves my productivity, and can demonstrate that.
So from Fred Graver, something to to piggyback off of that, he's asking basically, you've said in the past, hey, if you're a young college student or whoever, go develop for Alexa and cut your teeth. You still feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Because, like a lot of things, it's just about time. And, when you're selling service or personal services like that, you're selling an arbitrage on time. And if I were 16, well, it's just like when I first came to Dallas and I taught myself how to do macros in Lotus 1, 2, 3, because everybody was buying Lotus 1, 2, 3, but they didn't really know how to use it efficiently. And so I would go to all these different businesses and I would show them how to use a macro to automate this, and this. That was the best tool available at the time. And Alexa is a great tool, whether it's for business or home use. And it may well, and then you could extend that to, okay, here's how you connect it to your lights and to other features in your home, or add those features to your home and save on utilities and demonstrate to them the value proposition. Because it's hard to say no when you're truly getting value, and you would do it if you knew how to do it, but most people don't.
From Emerson Sklar, what do you see as the biggest missed opportunity or missteps companies that are investing in voice are making?
Patience. It's hard. I can tell you, we started a company called AudioNet, which was one of the first, if not the very first, streaming company in 1995. And everybody was like, you're an idiot. I can just turn on my TV or just turn on my radio. What the hell do I need you for? You just complicate things. Because back then, in order to be able to stream audio, you needed to have a PC, a dial-up modem, a TCP/IP client, a dial-up internet provider service, and then download a media player, and then go to a website and launch a batch file in order to be able, and just to be able to stream a file. And I knew eventually it'd all be integrated and simplified. And now we don't even think about what happens behind a stream. We need to be patient, knowing that ambient voice will get to that point where, it's just everywhere. It's in a chip, it's connected, it's part of the, the Internet of Things. And, that's going to take time. VR has got a comparable problem, right? When you first try VR, it seems really incredible and earth-shattering, but we don't have that day-to-day application where we have to go and put on those VR goggles or glasses all the time. And that's really an inhibitor for the adoption of VR. Voice is already past that, but in terms of more advanced applications or more impactful applications, we haven't seen that the one thing for consumers, at least, that really, changes overall behavior.
From Rolf Eggert, basically, how close are we to voice commerce? Next step change in voice commerce.
I don't know exactly how well it's working for Amazon, right? Because it's there available. And we've done some tests with some of my Shark Tank companies where we've set up keywords and stuff like that, and bought keywords so that when someone says, I don't want to say, tell me about voice, tell me about this product or that category, I just don't know what the result has been. So I don't really have an answer for when.
So we got a couple of questions in here that relate to this, but I'm going to read Karen Skate's version of it. Mark, in terms of trust, do you think that custom voice AI solutions will grow as a way to help companies gain more trust with their customers, since they will be able to own the data and not share with a third party?
I don't know necessarily about data ownership being the driving difference, because I don't know that most companies truly value that yet, because they don't really know how to use that data. And so it's almost more aggravation than not. But I think over time that it becomes more important.
From Delon Crosby, say, kid, Mark, you said access to a companion is better than no access. Even prior to the pandemic, many kids lacked access to early education. Moreover, kids don't really build social skills by pushing buttons or staring at screens. 1 to 10, how impactful will voice in education be?
I think the younger the child, the more impactful it'll be. It's really down to marketing and creativity. The minute we have, little dolls that catch fire, right, or little devices that are, comfy and cuddly, and there's been a lot of attempts, don't get me wrong, all the way going back to Teddy Ruxpin's, right, where, or back when I was a kid, you'd pull a string and it would talk to you and answer certain questions. And so we haven't gotten that transitional product yet that really propels it so that everybody wants one. But we keep on knocking on the door, and over time that'll happen. And once that becomes comfortable, that's enough that parents think that it's a valid babysitter, then we'll all use it, right? The minute a voice-driven device can babysit your 2-year-old or 3-year-old for 20 minutes or longer, that's when the game changes.
From Clint McLean, yesterday Nolan Bushnell spoke about how voice control would turn Netflix's interactive programming into a more immersive experience. As we see voice evolve beyond smart speakers and onto screens, do you see an intersection of voice in TV, movies, live sports, video games, etc.?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I look at my own usage, with Amazon Fire. I'm just now getting used to seeing the microphone button on the remote. And as we have more devices, maybe it's an Apple Watch with Siri, it becomes more ambient. Yeah, we're going to get more and more used to that. Then the experience absolutely changes, and Nolan is right.
From Ryan Hurrigan, Mark, do you see any big movers in voice and AI for peer-to-peer cash exchange or NFT exchange platforms?
Yeah, I don't see that so much in the short term, simply because it's really quick and easy just to type it. But I think over time, when voice becomes an incremental level of security, then yes, because once we can get the absolute identification of our voice, there's AI that can distinguish whether it's me or an AI generated impersonator. because we're seeing voice impersonation now with deep fakes. And so once we get to the level where we're able to uniquely identify, and that becomes just as strong a password as our faces, with facial recognition, then I think you'll see the expansion.
And one follow-up question on NFTs. This is from Colin Coogan. You described NFTs becoming more commonplace outside of collectibles. Should we be concerned about this from an environmental perspective? Is there a way to use this technology sustainably?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, with Bitcoin, it'll always be a little bit of a challenge just because Bitcoin's not going to really change. And so, their use of miners will continue to consume a lot of energy, but Bitcoin really has become a store of value. And, over time, there's a limit into the number that they can make. They're only going to make 21 million, right? Then it's just a question of transferring them. And that will probably use more energy than we'd like to see, but you also have to look at the offset, right? I think Ethereum in particular, Bitcoin to a lesser extent, Bitcoin has really become a store of value. It's digital gold. So you compare it as more people buy Bitcoin and less people buy gold, what's the environmental impact of mining, but also what is the environmental impact of the financial transactions that they're replacing? And that also applies to Ethereum. Ethereum is switching from a mining to what's called proof of stake, and I don't need to go into all the details, but they're minimizing their environmental impact. But the real equation is, if you go into any medium to big size city, 1, 2, or 3 of the largest buildings in that city are banking and financial institutions. They're always the biggest. And going back to trust again, finance is all built on trust. In order to give or get or earn money on your money, you got to go through a bunch of hoops and talk to a bunch of people who have to talk to a bunch of people who have to talk to a bunch of people. And doing it that way consumes far more energy than doing the same number of transactions on Ethereum in particular. And so there's something called decentralized finance, DeFi, and it's really just blown up over this past summer as people had stimulus checks and were at home. And using cryptocurrency, I can borrow money against the money I have in cryptocurrency in about 30 seconds. Whereas even for me to go borrow money, now I've got to call multiple people who have to call multiple people and sign multiple documents, which are sent via DocuSign just in order for that transaction to happen. Or, just so many. So the net of it is doing doing finance via cryptocurrency, even though there's more of a hit now, over time, as it truly disrupts, and I truly believe this, it'll disrupt traditional finance, the impact on the environment will be far less because it has a global implication.
And we'll take a few more questions here and make sure we get you out on time. Very thankful for you being here, of course. So there's a couple questions in the Q&A related to what do you see as perhaps the lowest hanging fruit for opportunities to bring voice and conversational AI behind it into sports?
That's a great question. I think over time, we're going to have more personalized experiences with sports. I look at what TikTok is doing. And if you haven't used TikTok, if you think you're too old or whatever, first get it and follow me at Cuban, because my kids and I are, they're hysterical. I'm just fun to laugh at. But what TikTok does is you use AI to learn what you like. Even better than Facebook, even better than Google and others, because it actually looks at the content of a video and connects it to you individually. And kids, Gen Z, that's how they consume information now. That's how they consume entertainment now. They're not going to sit and watch an hour game or 2-hour game on television. They're not going to take an hour. They're going to take 30-second bites of things. And so we're starting to look at ways we can personalize the presentation of NBA games, one possession at a time, or only dunks, or only this player, and just intermix it into a continuous stream of 15, 30, 45-second clips designed for the individual. Now, if you add voice to that and even more AI, then all of a sudden you can start, not just being rather than just waiting for the AI to tell you what it thinks you want, you can start adding to it what you truly want via voice, right? You couldn't do it via keyboard, but if I'm taking what TikTok is giving me right now, and you add voice to that, I can say, no more of this or more of that, or I really like this person, and have that built into the algorithms and the neural nets that are defining the personalization for you. That's not something you could do on a keyboard. That's not something that's easy to do without being intrusive by giving just multiple choices, through checkboxes. And so I think that's going to change how we consume and how we personalize significantly for all types of entertainment.
From Leon Rubenstein, Mark, do you believe that voice-enabled technology should also be used in parallel with humans as opposed to standalone, similar to other technology-assisted jobs? Think powered exoskeletons that help a person become more powerful, and what sort of use cases?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big move for cobots, right? Where there's people and robots working side by side, and each one complements the other skill set. And, we're doing that some with medicine. That's what we talked about, right? Where AI is, doing things quicker as first pass radiologists or first pass symptoms evaluators. And so being able to ask questions, have a doctor ask questions, or have an athlete ask a trainer questions, or a performance technologist questions. That's what we have now. We don't have strength and conditioning coaches anymore. We have performance technologists, because the technology is advanced so far that help our players get in better shape and get better at their jobs. And having voice activated cobots, if you will, and where the robot is an AI, I think for certain is going to happen. And particularly as it's integrated into VR. So where we try to use, virtual reality and augmented reality, and combining that with voice, where you can train it better and ask questions. That's already happening in industrial applications.
You sort of answered it, but I just really like the way this is presented. From Colin Bournes, what is the painkiller versus vitamin opportunity with voice for Fortune 500 businesses today?
Oh my God. I saw that in chat. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me, because I'm not sure. That's a hard question to answer. The pain points are all over the map for any industry. But that's the thing about innovation. You solve things that your customers don't know to ask for. If it were just about giving people what they wanted, then we'd still be having horse and buggies. No one asked for a car. And so I think, pain versus supplement. I think the cobots are one good step. Where are the places that we don't trust, right? Or where we can reduce hierarchy, and there's so many. Let me rephrase that. For most of us, our day-to-day involves so many little basic yes or no decisions, where it's, there's rote things that we do, there's repetitive things that we do, and where we can continue to train AIs using voice, as these things happen during the day, so that they can take over those processes. I think that's going to be a lot of the pain point, particularly in industrial applications, particularly in looking for defects, particularly in food and supply chain issues. Is this good or bad, good or bad, good or bad? Because those have significant impact.
So we're going to stop with the Q&A there, because I want to make sure we can get you out on time. So I want to ask you about two things to close. Okay. Sure. So you've been in the media lately about the Playin Tournament, right, for the NBA. Would you still have that same opinion if the Mavs move up a spot?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with it. Look, I like the Playin. Yeah, if that's okay. If this was a normal 82 game season, the Playin would be great, because it would extend interest to teams that weren't in the traditional playoff slots. But what's happening now is, rather than playing 82 games over 6 months or whatever it is, we're playing 72 games in a much more compressed environment. Add to that all the COVID issues. People don't realize that, like I'm called tier 1. In order for me to go to practices and games, I have to go through the same rigmarole, or most of the same rigmarole, as the players, except I don't have to test twice a day. The players have to test twice a day. So imagine if you just got into a city that you're traveling to at 2 in the morning, because you have a back-to-back and you're playing the next day. So you just played a game, you get in at 2 in the morning, you have to be up to test, be at the testing location at 9 in the morning, and then when you go back to your room, because you're not allowed to leave your room except to go pick up your food, and then you won't have a practice, and then you go to the game. So you're stuck in the psychological and mental toll of all this, along with the physical toll. You know, we have 20 games, give or take, left in our schedule, and there's less than a month to go. So that's the reason why I'm against the play-in, just because it just creates incremental stress. Whereas if this was a normal season in terms of playoff slots, they would kind of normalize themselves much earlier, and we could rest guys more.
Well, yeah, I'm rooting for you. Yeah, you turned me into a Mavs fan. I'll tell you that. A last question: when are you running for office?
Never, 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 never. That ship has sailed. It didn't happen, thank God, and I don't think it's necessary now. But I do think we do need technologically literate candidates, and that, you know, it's a real problem for us. I think particularly in terms of the global competition. You know, you hear from China, not to get too far afoot to your question, but real brief, you hear from China that they want to be number one at everything. And you hear from the United States, you know, we don't want to compete. You know, we don't have that sense of excellence that we used to have, or American exceptionalism. But fortunately, we have great entrepreneurs in voice, and we have great entrepreneurs across all the technology spectrum. And I think that's going to propel us. But it'd sure be nice if it was, you know, it was our mission to be number one at things.
Sure would. More and yeah, we need technologically savvy people, but we need ethical people too. So you know,
right? Because one without the other is really scary.
Yeah, and so you would have been good, but certainly understand that. Mark, look, thank you so much for giving us your time, giving us your knowledge. You're always generous with us. Thank you very much for closing Project Voice Worldwide.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Bradley. It's always enjoyable. The questions are always stimulating. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to put you back as attendee and let you go, because I know you got to run. And we're going to wrap this thing up. To everybody who joined us in Chattanooga earlier this week and who's been part of Project Voice Worldwide yesterday and today, thank you for being part of this with us. We will make the proceedings available to all attendees who are registered as rapidly as we get it. It'll either be tonight or tomorrow. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon.